From the moment Kira Johnson stepped inside the courthouse, the heat of unspoken judgment swirled around her like a dense fog. She had grown accustomed to subtle slights and sidelong glances, but nothing prepared her for the open hostility she felt that day. Whispers rippled across the gallery benches, fueled by rumors and prejudice. At the plaintiff's table, two uniformed officers smirked with grim confidence. A stern judge, rumored to side with law enforcement whenever possible, cleared his throat as he prepared to address the court. But no one expected the truth lurking beneath Kira's calm demeanor. She was ready. She had a devastating secret weapon that would rock the entire room. Kira Johnson's day began like any other. She woke before sunrise in her modest apartment in Brooklyn, right near the bustling intersection of Fulton and Nostrand. The gentle hum of early morning traffic lulled her into her routine. Coffee, a brisk walk to clear her mind, then a train ride into Manhattan's busy legal district. As she dressed in a pressed blouse and navy slacks, she mentally reviewed her schedule. She had a long list of errands for the Department of Justice that day, a docket filled with motions to file and briefs to read. Despite the mountain of responsibilities, she felt a quiet thrill. She loved her job and the privilege it gave her to help others, especially those often overlooked by the system. She never anticipated that her day would take a sharp turn when she decided to drive instead of taking the subway. A call had come in about a legal matter in the neighboring Queens neighborhood, and Kira wanted the flexibility of her car. She navigated the morning rush hour traffic, weaving cautiously past impatient commuters. Soft R&B played on the radio, her stress relieved by a gentle melody. She felt at peace until a siren screamed behind her. Glancing in her rearview mirror, she spotted a police cruiser tailing her. The lights flashed red and blue, dancing ominously against the windows of the buildings around them. Kira's pulse quickened. Though she had done nothing wrong, she signaled and pulled over, heart thumping. She reminded herself to stay calm. She knew the standard protocol. Keep your hands visible, wait for the officer to approach, comply with instructions. Still, her mind swirled with memories of countless news stories about black motorists being harassed or harmed during routine stops. Moments later, two officers stepped out. One was tall and lanky with pale skin and a mustache that hung limply above thin lips. Officer Paul Harmon. The second officer, David Baker, was heavier set, his face red from either the wind or irritation. They both approached Kira's window with a swagger that signaled authority. Kira lowered her window, greeted them politely, and asked how she could help. Officer Harmon demanded her license, registration, and proof of insurance. His tone was clipped, bordering on hostile. Kira complied without hesitation, handing over her documents. She asked why she was being stopped, but her question was met with a dismissive wave of Harmon's hand. Officer Baker smirked, leaning closer to peer inside her car. Kira tightened her grip on the steering wheel, that sense of caution building in her chest. You were speeding back there, Harmon finally answered, doing 45 and a 30. Kira knew she had not been speeding. She had been on the lookout for pedestrians and bicyclists in the busy neighborhood, carefully staying at or below the speed limit. But she also knew that any sign of argument could escalate the situation. She took a calm breath, her mind toggling between her knowledge of the law and her awareness of how these encounters often went. Officer, she replied steadily, I believe I was under the limit. Is there any possibility you might have clocked the wrong car? Baker rolled his eyes. I don't make mistakes with my radar gun. Listen, lady, are you going to give us trouble? Kira reined in her frustration. She was no stranger to microaggressions, but something about the officer's demeanor suggested more than just a casual insult. She had to pick her words carefully. I'm not trying to give you any trouble. I'm just asking for clarity. Harmon's thin lips curled into a sneer. He took a step back, consulting with Baker in hushed tones, though Kira caught snatches of their whispered conversation, something about attitude and these people. Her eyes narrowed. She'd heard enough coded language in her life to know what was going on. Inside, a spark of anger ignited. Officer Harmon returned. Step out of the car, he ordered. We need to do a quick search. Search for what reason? Kira asked, her heart pounding. She knew that to request a search, they needed probable cause or her consent, which she had every right to refuse. Baker huffed, leaning forward again. Are you resisting, ma'am? Kira shook her head, working hard to maintain a composed tone. I'm just asserting my right to ask why I'm being searched. That's all. The tension escalated quickly. Harmon yanked on the door handle. "Get out of the car now." Kira exhaled sharply and opened the door, stepping out slowly, hands visible. People on the sidewalk began to slow, curious about the scene unfolding. Kira noticed the sideways glances, the subtle shock or discomfort on bystanders' faces. Somewhere, a phone camera was raised, capturing the moment. She set her jaw in determination. If they wanted to play this game, she would comply, but only to a point. As Kira stood beside her car, Officer Baker patted her down brusquely while Harmon rummaged through the back seat. Kira had never felt so violated. Each time she tried to speak, Baker snapped at her to stay quiet. She complied, though her anger roiled just beneath the surface. She wasn't just any passerby. She was a United States attorney, someone who had worked tirelessly to uphold justice. She was intimately familiar with the law and the boundary these officers were crossing. Eventually, Harmon slammed the back door. "There's nothing here. Let's just write her up for speeding and maybe resisting an officer." "Resisting?" Kira repeated, alarmed. "I cooperated fully." Baker smirked again. "We'll see what the report says." The officers didn't realize they had just picked a fight with someone who possessed extensive legal expertise, someone who, in a single phone call, could set a serious investigation into motion. But Kira held her cards close. She would not reveal her position yet. She wanted to see how far they would take this charade. With her heart pounding, Kira promised herself she would fight back. This injustice would not go unanswered. As Kira watched the officers drive away, leaving her with a summons for speeding and a threat of additional charges, she felt herself trembling, though not with fear. She trembled with a blazing fury. The calm facade she displayed during the encounter had been her shield, honed over years of enduring casual racism, dismissive stares, and sneering comments that chipped away at her sense of belonging. A shield she'd carefully constructed out of pride, dignity, and most of all, resolve. Long before she had the power to prosecute cases, Kira Johnson had been a young girl growing up in the heart of Brooklyn. Her parents, Bernard and Eleanor Thompson, had instilled in her a profound sense of justice from an early age. Her father was a history professor at CUNY specializing in African American studies. Her mother was a social worker who advocated for low-income families. Dinner table conversations revolved around civil rights heroes, systemic oppression, and ways to fight for those who lacked the means to stand up for themselves. She learned from stories of ancestors who marched in Selma or staged sit-ins, the unbreakable spirit of resistance. But she also learned that real change required a blend of passion and strategic thinking. When Kira was just 9 years old, she witnessed a tense argument between her uncle and a police officer who had roughed him up without cause. Kira remembered feeling small and powerless, tears burning her eyes. That image of a grown man forced to stand there while he was unjustly berated never left her mind. It inspired her to pursue law, to become someone who could challenge abuse of power at its highest levels. In high school, Kira excelled in debate club, quickly becoming known for her sharp intellect and cool composure under pressure. She also volunteered at a local community legal aid office, where she saw firsthand how the law could be both a sword and a shield. A kindly lawyer named Brenda Morris mentored Kira, teaching her the basics of legal research and the importance of compassion. Brenda often said, "Empathy, Kira, empathy. Without it, you become just another cog in a broken system." At Columbia University, Kira double majored in political science and African American studies. She'd often find herself in heated seminars about systemic racism, where her personal experiences and academic research melded into a deep conviction. The justice system needed to be reformed from within. She graduated with high honors, moved on to NYU School of Law, and later landed a coveted clerkship at the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York. Her supervisors recognized her unwavering commitment to civil rights. When Kira moved on to a position with the Department of Justice in the Eastern District, it felt like destiny. All those years, Kira cultivated a keen understanding of the law's complexities and its potential to be wielded for good. She carried with her the stories of her family, her mentors, and the countless victims of injustice. She made a personal vow. If she ever encountered a situation of blatant racial discrimination, she would address it head-on. She believed in systematic change, but sometimes the path to that change required bold individual stance. As she headed to her apartment after the confrontation with Officers Harmon and Baker, Kira's mind churned. The memory of their sneering faces, The humiliation of being searched on the sidewalk for no legitimate reason refused to fade. The old rage of feeling powerless flashed to life, but this time she was not a helpless child. She had the means and the authority to fight back. Once home, she sat at her kitchen table, the smell of fresh coffee still clinging to the air. The summons lay next to her laptop like a badge of injustice. She wanted to shred it in frustration, but she knew better. This was more than just a ticket, it was evidence. She opened her laptop and typed a quick memo summarizing what had happened. She included the time, location, and the details of the officer's conduct. She described the racist undertones, their bullying tactics, and their threat to add bogus charges for resisting. Her notes were precise. Every detail mattered in a potential investigation. Then she made a call to an old friend, Justin Cole, a fellow attorney who worked in a different branch of the Justice Department. Justin had been her classmate at NYU, a brilliant litigator with a passion for rooting out police misconduct. Kira didn't give him all the details over the phone, just enough so he understood this was something serious, something that might require federal oversight. Justin agreed to help in any way he could. Throughout the evening, Kira's emotions whirled between simmering anger and resolute determination. She thought of her parents, who had always stood up for what was right. She thought of Brenda Morris, who taught her the power of empathy and strategy. She thought of all the people who had been in her situation, lacking the resources or the knowledge to fight back. She refused to let this incident be swept under the rug. Tomorrow, she whispered aloud, locking her notes in her home safe. Tomorrow, I take the first step. Morning sunlight filtered through Kira's window, gilding her living room in a soft glow. She woke feeling more determined than ever, but also with a gnawing unease about what might happen next. She was used to legal battles playing out behind stacks of briefs and motions, not on the side of a city street in front of random onlookers. Nevertheless, she was prepared to confront the situation. After showering and dressing in a crisp navy suit, Kira meticulously organized her documents. She had a meeting later that afternoon regarding another case, but her mind lingered on how she would address the incident with Officers Harmon and Baker. Her phone buzzed, Justin confirming their lunchtime meeting at a nearby cafe. Kira exhaled, grateful to have support from a friend who understood the intricacies of federal law and the complexities of racial profiling cases. She headed out, locking her apartment door behind her, and took the subway this time, partly to avoid any additional run-ins with local law enforcement. Arriving at the Department of Justice building, Kira passed through security with her usual professional smile, though inside she was bracing herself. She carried the summons in a neat envelope tucked securely under her arm. Her morning was consumed by meetings and phone calls until finally noon arrived. She slipped out to the bustling cafe where Justin waited. He rose to greet her, looking concerned. Justin was a tall man with a warm smile, though that warmth was subdued now as he looked at Kira. They ordered coffee and sandwiches, then sat by a window overlooking the street where midday traffic rumbled by. She recounted the entire story. The supposed speeding violation, the forced car search, the humiliating pat-down, and the officer's racist undertones. Justin listened intently, eyebrows furrowed. By the time she finished, he seemed as incensed as she was. "These guys have no idea who they're dealing with," he said softly but firmly. "But it's bigger than that. This is exactly what we talk about all the time, abuse of power under the guise of law enforcement." Kira nodded. "I'm worried they'll file a false report or escalate. They mentioned resisting arrest. If they put that on the record, it could tarnish my reputation, even if I can clear my name. I don't want to think about how it could harm other people they stop." "Exactly," Justin agreed. "We need to be strategic. Are you thinking of reporting this to Internal Affairs or going straight to the Civil Rights Division?" "I'm thinking both," Kira said, tapping her pen on the table. "I can also file a formal complaint through the city's Civilian Complaint Review Board, but I want to wait and see if they actually file any official charges. If they do, I'll reveal my credentials in court if necessary." Justin hesitated. "That'll be a bombshell. But Kira, be careful. Some judges hate surprises in their courtroom. Then again, if the judge isn't on it. Well, you said these guys are known for intimidation. Maybe they have connections." Kira's jaw tightened. "I'll handle it. Right now, I'm going to gather more evidence. I'm sure there were bystanders who recorded some of it on their phones. I'm going to see if I can track down any witness statements." After lunch, Kira returned to her office. She spent part of the afternoon searching social media, scanning hashtags and local neighborhood pages to see if any videos had been posted of her encounter. She discovered one short clip on Twitter that showed Officer Baker pushing her against the side of her car while Officer Harmon rummaged through the back seat. The video wasn't long, but it clearly showed Kira was calm and cooperative, no sign of resistance. Kira downloaded the clip immediately, carefully documenting its source. Just as she finished labeling the video file, her cell phone rang. She glanced down. Unknown number. She debated not answering, but a gut feeling made her pick up. "Hello," she said. Silence crackled for a moment. Then a gruff voice spoke. "MS. Kira Johnson." Her pulse quickened. "Yes. This is Detective Daniel Callahan, NYPD Internal Affairs. I received a message from Justin Cole about an incident involving two officers, Paul Harmon and David Baker. I'd like to meet with you." Kira's heart lifted slightly. She hadn't expected an internal affairs detective to contact her so quickly, but it was a promising sign. "Of course, detective. When's good for you?" The detective suggested the following morning at a small conference room in the NYPD headquarters. Kira agreed. She ended the call with a glimmer of hope. Someone within the system was willing to investigate. Yet, that evening, as Kira was preparing dinner in her tiny kitchen, she got another unexpected call. This time, from an NYPD desk officer informing her there was now a warrant for her arrest on charges of resisting arrest and obstruction. The news hit her like a punch to the gut. She nearly dropped her phone. The officer stated that Kira was required to report to the local precinct or face additional penalties. Her mind reeled. They had actually done it, twisted the story to paint her as the aggressor. She cursed under her breath, panic warring with fury. Then she remembered who she was. She inhaled, holding on to her composure. This was beyond mere intimidation. This was a calculated move to scare her and tarnish her record before she could push forward with her complaint. If she was arrested, even for a moment, a mugshot and public record could follow her for years. For a moment, Kira felt a wave of despair. Then she steadied herself. She was not alone, and she had the truth. Grabbing her keys, her documents, and a charged phone, she marched out the door, ready to confront the precinct, armed with the only weapon that truly mattered, her legal knowledge. Late evening had fallen by the time Kira arrived at the 78th precinct in Brooklyn. The building's cold brick exterior loomed under flickering street lights. She parked her car and took a moment to compose herself, going through mental checklists of the law. Her breath came quickly, betraying the nerves she tried to mask under her professional exterior. When Kira stepped into the station, the stale smell of sweat and old coffee assaulted her senses. Officers milled about, some handling paperwork, others chatting idly. The moment she approached the counter, heads turned. She told the desk sergeant she was there regarding a warrant. The desk sergeant, a graying man with tired eyes, seemed perplexed at first, perhaps not expecting the subject of a warrant to calmly walk in. He instructed her to wait. Kira settled into a plastic chair under flickering fluorescent lights, ignoring the suspicious glares from some officers. After an agonizing half hour, a young officer led her to a small interrogation room. Its cinder block walls were painted an off-white, and a single overhead light buzzed faintly. She set her documents on the table, her heart thudding. Shortly after, Detective Daniel Callahan entered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard. Kira recognized his voice from the phone call. He gave her a nod that was somewhere between professional courtesy and sympathy. "MS. Johnson, thank you for coming in," he said. "I understand there's a warrant out for your arrest, but I also spoke with Justin Cole, who said you have information that might clear this up." Kira handed him the summons for speeding, the short Twitter video clip on a USB drive, and the notes she'd taken about the encounter. He scanned them briefly, frowning. Detective Callahan scratched his chin and leaned forward. "This is serious. Officers Harmon and Baker filed a report claiming you resisted, tried to flee, and verbally threatened them." "That's a lie," Kira said, working to keep her voice steady. She tapped the USB. "That clip shows part of the stop. I didn't resist. If anything, they were the aggressors." Callahan exhaled. "I'm not the judge here, but I can see there's more to this than meets the eye. For formality's sake, we have to process you, but I'll do it discreetly. Then we can start an investigation. I'll ask the district attorney's office to hold off on pressing charges until we've reviewed everything." Kira's heart sank at the idea of being processed. She nodded though, understanding the protocol. All right, she managed. He escorted her through a series of hallways. Kira's cheeks burned with humiliation as she was fingerprinted and briefly photographed, though Callahan ensured she was not handcuffed. The entire ordeal felt surreal. Here she was, an assistant U.S. attorney with an unblemished record, being treated like a criminal. She forced herself to breathe, reminding herself this was temporary and justice could still prevail. After what felt like an eternity, Callahan returned her belongings. He guided her to a quieter office space, away from curious eyes. There, Kira recounted her story again in detail. From the moment she saw the flashing lights to the officer's sneering remarks and the baseless search of her vehicle. Callahan took copious notes. "I'll need to interview them separately," he said. "But let's be clear. If they claimed you resisted and you have video evidence to the contrary, this could be a serious case of falsified reports." "It's not just about me," Kira said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "This is likely a pattern. If they did it to me, they could be doing it to countless others who don't have the resources or the knowledge to fight back." Callahan paused, then nodded. "I understand. I'll do my part, but keep in mind that this precinct tends to close ranks. Not everyone's going to be happy I'm looking into it." Kira thanked him for his honesty. By the time she left the station, her emotions teetered between relief at having found a potential ally and outrage at the system's willingness to protect bad actors. She returned home in the early hours, exhausted, her mind churning with potential next steps. She needed to inform her superiors at the Department of Justice. An actual arrest record, no matter how unfounded, would raise questions. But if there was ever a test of the system she believed in, this was it. Sleep didn't come easily. She lay awake, replaying the precinct scene over and over. The cold demands for her fingerprints, the flash of the camera capturing her mugshot. She felt an unfamiliar vulnerability, tempered only by her unwavering resolve. One thought circled in her mind: let them see me in court. Let them see who I really am. And when that moment came, she would not hold back. The summons and the warrant demanded that Kira appear in criminal court just 1 week later. In that short span, Kira hired a private defense lawyer, an ironic twist given her own role as a federal prosecutor. She chose a seasoned attorney named Gloria Romano, known for her expertise in wrongful arrests and civil rights cases. Gloria was a fiery advocate who had taken on NYPD officers before and won. On the morning of the hearing, Kira dressed impeccably in a charcoal gray skirt suit. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair, a soft twist pinned at the nape of her neck, reflecting the controlled fury simmering inside her. She refused to walk into that courtroom looking disheveled or intimidated. She was determined to hold her head high. Gloria picked her up, and together they traveled to the Kings County Criminal Court in downtown Brooklyn. The building's cavernous interior buzzed with the daily chaos of arraignments and hearings. Lawyers scurrying with thick case files, defendants in cheap suits pacing nervously, and stoic officers watching from the corners. The air reeked of stale coffee and tension. As Kira and Gloria entered the courtroom, Kira's pulse accelerated. She recognized the presiding judge from local headlines, Judge Frank Sullivan. He was rumored to be tough on defendants and notoriously deferential to law enforcement. He rarely questioned police testimony, even when there were inconsistencies. Rumor had it that complaints of racial bias often fell on deaf ears in his court. Before their case was called, Kira glanced at the front row of benches where officers Harmon and Baker sat, their uniforms crisp, expressions smug. Their attorney, a stern-faced district attorney named Catherine Morrison, whispered something to them, prompting laughter from Baker. Kira swallowed her anger, her heart thumping. She reminded herself of her father's words: "Never lose your cool in the face of injustice. That's when they have power over you." Finally, the court clerk announced Kira's case. Gloria walked forward, Kira by her side. A hush fell. Judge Sullivan flipped through the file, his expression impassive. Catherine Morrison stood first, outlining the charges of resisting arrest, obstruction of governmental administration, and disorderly conduct. She claimed Kira had become belligerent during a lawful traffic stop, refused to comply with officer instructions, and even attempted to flee. At that last statement, Kira nearly snorted in disbelief. Gloria placed a steady hand on her arm, cautioning her to remain composed. Once Catherine finished, Gloria cleared her throat and stepped forward. "Your Honor," Gloria began, her voice calm but resonant. My client categorically denies these charges. We have video evidence, brief but crucial, that contradicts the officer's account. Ms. Johnson not only cooperated fully, but was subjected to an improper search and humiliating treatment. Judge Sullivan peered over his reading glasses. Video evidence? Is it from a body cam? It's from a bystander, Gloria replied. Shot on a cell phone and posted online. We have the original file as well. Catherine interjected. Your Honor, I'd caution reliance on shaky cell phone videos. There's no guarantee of authenticity. My officers have clean records, and the official police report states the defendant resisted. We have no reason to doubt their testimony. Judge Sullivan frowned slightly. I'll allow the video, but it must be verified. For now, we'll proceed with the arraignment. Ms. Johnson, how do you plead? Gloria spoke before Kira could. Not guilty, Your Honor. Sullivan made a note. Very well. Let's schedule a preliminary hearing to review the evidence. He glanced up at Kira for the first time, his gaze lingering. Kira felt an unsettling chill, as though he was assessing more than just her posture. Bail is set at $5,000. Next matter. Kira's cheeks flamed with indignation at the idea of bail for such a charge, but Gloria had prepared for this. She posted bail immediately. As Kira turned to leave, her eyes locked with Officer Harmon. He smirked, his lips mouthing words she couldn't fully discern, but she recognized the contempt. She forced herself to turn away. Out in the hallway, Gloria led her to a bench. This is going to be an uphill battle with Sullivan on the bench, Gloria sighed. And that DA, Morrison, she's got a reputation for defending the police at all cost. Kira stared at the corridor's drab walls, mind racing. I'm not backing down. I need to speak with the Civil Rights Division. This could become a federal matter. Gloria nodded. I agree. The moment you reveal your position with the DOJ, it'll change the game. But do you want to tip your hand so soon? Kira paused, considering. Not yet, she said finally. I need more evidence, more insight into these officers' track records. And if Sullivan tries to railroad this, we'll see about moving it to federal court. Gloria agreed, and they parted ways after scheduling a strategy meeting. Kira walked out of the courthouse with an uneasy mix of anger and steely resolve. The subtle slights, the humiliating pat down, the malicious charges, none of it would deter her. She pulled out her phone to call Justin, telling him the next steps. She also planned to talk to a contact at the Civil Rights Division, laying the groundwork for a potential investigation into these officers. As she stepped onto the bustling street, Kira felt the wind on her face, a reminder of her freedom and her will. She thought about how many others, less equipped than she, might have been crushed by this system. A silent promise echoed in her mind. She would not be broken. She would fight this injustice head-on, and when the time was right, she would let them know exactly who they were dealing with. After the initial court appearance, Kira dove head first into gathering more evidence. She and Gloria constructed a meticulous defense strategy, guided by Kira's unique insider knowledge of how prosecutors operate. During her free hours, late into the night, she pored over case law, studied previous complaints against officers Harmon and Baker, and analyzed the local precinct's record of misconduct allegations. Justin put Kira in touch with Amina Clark, a staff attorney at the New York Civil Liberties Union who specialized in police accountability. Over a cup of coffee at a local diner, Kira shared the details of her case. Amina provided Kira with a trove of insights into Harmon and Baker's histories. They had been named in at least 3 prior complaints for excessive force, though none had resulted in formal discipline. The complaints had all been dismissed for lack of evidence. Amina sighed, pushing the files toward Kira. The pattern's there. We just need to prove it conclusively. And since you have that video, that's a start. Kira thumbed through the documents, her heart pounding. She saw statements from individuals who claimed they'd been harassed or manhandled by Harmon and Baker. She frowned, eyes scanning lines about unlawful searches, intimidation, and racial slurs. The language of the complainants varied, but the core allegations were disturbingly similar. The officers targeted people of color during traffic stops and escalated the encounters without clear justification. Why weren't any of these complaints sustained? Kira asked softly, though she suspected the answer. Amina rolled her eyes. You know how it goes. Witnesses can't be tracked down, internal affairs finds some technical reason to dismiss them, or the judge gives officers the benefit of the doubt. It's a systemic thing. Kira clenched her jaw. Well, maybe this time will be different. Amina smiled. a hint of optimism shining through her fatigue. It might be. You have the credentials, and you clearly know how to navigate the system. Just be cautious. The pushback might get ugly. Armed with these files, Kira returned to her office at the Department of Justice. She tiptoed a fine line. She hadn't officially disclosed her predicament to her direct supervisors, worried they might remove her from active cases or, worse, question her ability to remain unbiased. Still, she confided in one colleague, Patricia Evans, who had become a close friend over the years. Patricia listened with rapt attention as Kira laid out the events. "This is insane," Patricia said, pacing the office. "These officers clearly picked the wrong person to harass. But Kira, you gotta protect yourself. The minute they find out you're a federal attorney, it could escalate." Kira nodded. "I know. But if I reveal it at the right time, it might scare them into dropping the case or possibly open them up to federal charges." She hesitated, then added, "I just hope the judge doesn't dismiss me outright because of some prejudice." Patricia folded her arms. "If he does, you file a motion to recuse him or transfer. You have the law on your side. And if that fails, well, the Civil Rights Division might open a full-blown investigation." That possibility buoyed Kira's spirits. The Department of Justice had, in recent years, become more active in investigating police departments for patterns of unlawful conduct. If Kira could present compelling evidence, perhaps the DOJ would step in. She had no illusions. It could take months, if not years, to see real accountability, but she was prepared for the long haul. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of legal motions. Gloria filed a motion to dismiss the charges, citing contradictory evidence in the police report and the cell phone footage. Meanwhile, Kira quietly reached out to the bystander who had filmed the stop. The woman, Tasha White, was initially reluctant to get involved, but once Kira explained the stakes, Tasha agreed to provide a sworn statement. Her affidavit described the entire incident, emphasizing that Kira never raised her voice, never physically resisted, and complied with every order the officers gave. Tasha recounted hearing the officers mutter demeaning comments about Kira being one of those loudmouths and acting above her station. Though the statements weren't overtly racial on the video, the undertones were clear. Kira's gut twisted as she read it. It was the same kind of ugly prejudice she had felt in every glare and every mocking sneer from Harmon and Baker. Finally, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. Kira, Gloria, and Justin walked into the courthouse armed with sworn statements, video evidence, and a stack of the officers' past complaints. Kira felt anxious energy crackling through her. This was the moment where she might expose them, or at least plant doubt in the judge's mind. But one question still gnawed at her. Would Judge Sullivan actually consider the evidence fairly? She took her seat at the defense table. Across the aisle, the prosecution team, led by Catherine Morrison, sat with the officers. Morrison wore a self-assured expression, as though she already had the judge's verdict in her pocket. Harmon and Baker stared directly at Kira, arms folded, as if daring her to meet their gaze. Kira didn't flinch. She inhaled, clasped her hands, and reminded herself she was not just fighting for her own vindication. She was fighting for every person who had been silenced or discredited by officers like Harmon and Baker. As the court clerk called the case, Kira's eyes flicked to the judge's bench. Sullivan stepped in, robe flowing. He cleared his throat, ready to begin. Kira's pulse pounded in her ears. Whatever happened next could determine if truth would finally see the light or if the system's ingrained bias would crush her too. The preliminary hearing opened with formalities. Judge Sullivan, his expression stony, ordered both sides to present their arguments. Catherine Morrison strode to the lectern first, methodically outlining the police narrative. Kira allegedly refused multiple commands, acted aggressively, and impeded the officer's lawful investigation. Morrison described Kira's behavior in hyperbolic terms, painting her as an out-of-control individual who had no respect for law enforcement. Kira's stomach turned at the lies, but she schooled her features into neutrality. Next, Gloria took the floor. With measured confidence, she introduced the cell phone video, playing it for the court. The short clip showed Kira calmly standing by her car, while Officer Baker forcibly patted her down. There was no sign of aggression on Kira's part. In the background, snippets of the officer's snide comments could be heard, albeit faintly. Gloria pointed out the lack of any audible commands from the officers that Kira allegedly refused. Judge Sullivan leaned forward, peering at the screen. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, passed across his face before it hardened again. Once the video ended, Gloria called Tasha White to the stand. Tasha testified that she had recorded the video and witnessed the incident from start to finish. She emphasized that Kira never resisted or obstructed. She also recounted hearing one officer call Kira a loudmouth, though she couldn't identify which one specifically. Morrison rose for cross-examination, her voice dripping with skepticism. Ms. White, could you have missed something while filming? Isn't it possible, Ms. Johnson resisted before you started recording? No, Tasha replied firmly, meeting Morrison's gaze. I started recording the moment I saw them pull her out of the car. She didn't struggle or yell. Morrison pressed further. But you only captured a few seconds of the incident. There could have been more. Tasha stood her ground. I watched the whole thing from across the street. She was calm the entire time. When Tasha stepped down, Gloria presented the complaint records against Officers Harmon and Baker. Morrison objected, claiming they were irrelevant. Judge Sullivan frowned, looking inclined to agree with Morrison. For a moment, Kira feared he'd strike the evidence entirely. But Gloria argued that the officer's history of similar complaints showed a pattern of misconduct. Sullivan allowed a brief discussion of the records, but only as context, refusing to let them overshadow the current case. Catherine Morrison then called Officer Harmon to testify. He spoke in a clipped tone, detailing how Kira refused to comply by questioning their authority. He described Kira as irate, claiming she'd screamed and made threats. Kira's frustration mounted. None of it was true. Then Baker took the stand, echoing Harmon's statements. They both stuck to the script, doubling down on Kira's alleged aggression. Throughout the testimony, Kira sensed Judge Sullivan's patience wearing thin, yet not necessarily with the officers. The judge seemed annoyed that the defense would dare challenge law enforcement's version of events. His tone grew sharper each time Gloria objected or asked pointed questions. Finally, Gloria informed the court that Kira herself wished to testify. Kira stood, smoothing her suit jacket. She walked to the witness stand, nerves dancing in her stomach. She glanced at the judge, who regarded her with a hint of displeasure, perhaps bracing for an emotional plea. But Kira had no intention of making an emotional spectacle. She was there to tell the truth. Under Gloria's questioning, Kira recounted the stop with calm precision. She clarified that she had never resisted and had asked only about the reason for the search. Gloria guided her to explain how the officers escalated the situation. Then came the cross-examination. Catherine Morrison approached, eyes cool. Ms. Johnson, she began, is it true that you questioned the officer's decision to stop you and conduct a search? Kira nodded. Yes, I asked why I was being searched. That's not illegal. I never refused to comply. Morrison's lips curved slightly. But you did speak back to them, correct? You didn't remain silent. Kira resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Asking questions is not resisting, counselor. Morrison's voice hardened. Isn't it possible that you were irritated and hostile? Perhaps the officers perceived your tone as threatening. Kira took a measured breath. I used a calm tone the entire time, which is evident from the video. The officer's perception doesn't align with the actual footage. At that point, Kira felt a surge of adrenaline. This was her moment. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, if I may, there's additional context regarding my understanding of the law during that stop. Judge Sullivan raised an eyebrow. What context is that? Kira looked at him squarely. I am an assistant U.S. attorney with the Department of Justice, Eastern District of New York. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Gloria stood a bit taller. Morrison's eyes widened momentarily, then narrowed. Harmon and Baker exchanged stunned glances. Judge Sullivan's face froze for a moment. The tension hung thick in the air, as though the very walls of the courtroom were shocked into silence. Kira continued, her voice steady. I didn't reveal my position at the time of the stop to avoid any conflict of interest or the appearance of impropriety, but I am intimately familiar with the constitutional standards regarding search and seizure. I knew I was in the right. I complied anyway because I feared for my safety. The officers were aggressive and made demeaning remarks. That is the full truth of this matter. Gasps and whispered remarks filled the room. The revelation was a bombshell. Judge Sullivan blinked rapidly, trying to regain composure. Morrison stammered, Well, Your Honor, her position doesn't grant her immunity from the law. She's still. But Sullivan raised a hand. His eyes flicked to Kira, then to the officers. Indeed, it does not, he said carefully. But it certainly adds weight to her understanding of the situation. The courtroom buzzed like an electric wire. Kira felt the shift in the air, an undeniable pivot in power dynamics. The racist cops and the skeptical judge had just discovered that the woman they tried to railroad wasn't merely a random defendant. She was someone who could navigate the federal system. And that single fact changed everything. The revelation of Kira's position as a U.S. attorney triggered a cascade of events. Within 24 hours, a wave of internal and external scrutiny descended on the NYPD. Detective Daniel Callahan, previously cautious, suddenly had the impetus and the political coverage to dig deeper into Harmon and Baker's conduct. Meanwhile, Kira's own supervisors at the Department of Justice, once made aware of the situation, convened a special meeting to discuss whether the DOJ should launch a formal civil rights investigation. In the days following the preliminary hearing, Kira witnessed a stark change in the courtroom's atmosphere. Judge Sullivan, who had been aloof and somewhat dismissive, became notably more measured in his tone. During a subsequent motion hearing, he referred to Kira as Counsel Johnson, acknowledging her legal standing in a way that subtly signaled the playing field had shifted. Harmon and Baker, seated at the prosecution's table, looked less smug. They seemed to sense the tide turning against them. Outside the courtroom, Kira's life was upended. Reporters, alerted by the public court transcripts, swarmed the courthouse entrance. They smelled a headline. U.S. Attorney accuses NYPD officers of racial profiling. Kira tried to avoid the cameras, ducking into cabs or side exits to escape the throng of microphones. She wasn't seeking publicity, only justice. But in a city as large and media-driven as New York, such sensational details didn't stay quiet for long. Her superiors at the DOJ were equally concerned about the optics. Assistant Attorney General Victoria Santiago summoned Kira to a private office for a long conversation. Santiago, a composed woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair, eyed Kira carefully over the rim of her glasses. "I've reviewed the court transcripts," Santiago said, folding her hands atop the file in front of her. "This is a delicate situation. You understand that?" "Yes," Kira nodded, bracing herself. "Yes, ma'am." Santiago's gaze softened slightly. "First, I want to say how sorry I am that you had to endure such treatment. We take allegations of misconduct seriously. But as you know, whenever a DOJ attorney is involved in a personal legal matter that reflects on law enforcement, it complicates things. We have to ensure there's no conflict of interest." "I understand," Kira replied, her voice steady. "I'm not asking the DOJ to represent me personally, only to look into these officers if the evidence warrants a civil rights investigation." Santiago leaned back, tapping a pen against her desk. "Detective Callahan from NYPD Internal Affairs has already been in contact. The Civil Rights Division is reviewing your complaint and the prior complaints against these officers. There's also the possibility of a pattern and practice investigation into the precinct if we find credible evidence that this is systemic." Kira felt a surge of hope. "So the department is taking it seriously?" "Yes. But Kira, be prepared. This will likely get messy. The local police union may retaliate, the media coverage could intensify, and there's always the risk of a conflict between federal and local authorities." Kira steeled herself. "I'm ready." Once she left Santiago's office, Kira exhaled, feeling a little lighter. For years, she had worked on behalf of the government, often prosecuting financial crimes or assisting with civil rights cases from an institutional standpoint. Now the institution was compelled to examine one of its most entrenched partnerships, local law enforcement. As the investigation gained traction, Kira spent hours with federal investigators, detailing her incident, providing the video evidence, and turning over the records Amina Clark had shared. Detective Callahan, too, ramped up interviews. He spoke with Tasha White, the other complainants, and local witnesses who had negative encounters with Harmon and Baker. Rumors swirled that these officers were part of a clique within the precinct known for targeting minorities with spurious traffic stops to meet quotas. Kira thought about all the people who might have suffered in silence. Now, their voices had a chance to be heard. Meanwhile, the legal case against Kira didn't magically disappear. Morrison stubbornly refused to drop the charges, perhaps out of fear that doing so would confirm wrongdoing. A court date loomed for the next hearing, during which Gloria planned to present the new findings from the DOJ investigation, hoping to have the charges dismissed outright. Tensions ran high. Kira noticed her phone vibrating with unknown callers more frequently. She began receiving anonymous voicemails, some supportive, others threatening. Justin advised her to be cautious, and Kira started varying her routine, staying vigilant whenever she traveled, especially at night. Relief crashed over Kira like a wave. Gloria squeezed her hand. A ripple of low chatter coursed through the gallery. Morrison's shoulders sagged, and she turned to whisper furiously at Harmon and Baker. The officers looked stunned, their faces awash with the realization that they were no longer in control of the narrative. Sullivan rapped his gavel for order. Furthermore, he continued, I am ordering the record of MS Johnson's arrest to be expunged. There shall be no criminal record associated with this incident. This court is adjourned. He rose and exited quickly, leaving the room abuzz. Kira wanted to shout with relief, but she kept her composure. Within moments, reporters flooded the aisles, peppering questions. Gloria shielded Kira, leading her toward the corridor as cameras flashed. Outside the courthouse, Kira finally allowed herself to breathe. She glanced up at the sky, the bright sun a welcome contrast to weeks of looming dark clouds. Justin joined them, a broad grin splitting his face. This is huge, he said, clapping Kira on the shoulder. They never thought this day would come. Still, Kira felt a pang in her chest. Those officers might face disciplinary action, but how many others like them are still out there? We'll keep shining the light, Gloria said. That's how you root out corruption, one case at a time. Within days, the police commissioner announced that Harmon and Baker would be suspended without pay pending a formal departmental trial on allegations of falsifying records and violating protocol. Detective Callahan had recommended they be charged with perjury for lying on official documents. The district attorney's office, reeling from the scandal, faced mounting pressure to prosecute the officers or risk further public outcry. For Kira, the victory was bittersweet. She'd exposed two bad cops, but the experience had laid bare the magnitude of the struggle. Racist policing wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a broader illness. Nonetheless, she had proven that with unwavering resolve and the right resources, justice could prevail against entrenched power. The karmic backlash had come swiftly for Harmon and Baker, and it was well-deserved. In the following weeks, Kira supported the Civil Rights Division's deeper probe into the precinct. Some officers cooperated, emboldened to speak out about discriminatory practices they'd witnessed. Others remained silent or defensive. Still, the tide seemed to be turning, at least a bit, toward accountability. Late one evening, Kira sat in her kitchen, nursing a cup of chamomile tea while scrolling through the day's news. Headlines blared about the scandal, about the suspended officers, about the possibility of broader reforms. She set down her phone, exhaustion pulling at her, but also a spark of hope. She had walked through the fire and emerged, not unscathed. She would never forget the humiliation of that arrest or the fear, but stronger, resolute. If the system could be swayed to protect one innocent person, perhaps with continued pressure, it could protect many more. Kira Johnson would do everything in her power to ensure it, because sometimes karma needed a helping hand, and she was more than willing to provide it. A month passed since the charges against Kira were dismissed, and life took on a new rhythm. Though she returned to her usual duties at the Department of Justice, things were far from normal. Her story had ignited a wide conversation about racial profiling and police accountability. Community groups hosted forums, inviting Kira to speak. She accepted when she could, standing before crowds of concerned citizens to share her experience. Each time she spoke, she emphasized she was not anti-police. She was pro-justice. The applause and cheers fueled her resolve. Meanwhile, the attorney cleared his throat. Thank you for agreeing to meet. My clients, Officers Harmon and Baker, are willing to accept disciplinary measures if you drop any pursuit of federal charges. They claim they never intended for this to escalate the way it did. Kira felt a cold anger coil in her. So now they're sorry. Now that they're facing real consequences? She shook her head. That's not how accountability works. Besides, I don't control the DOJ's decisions on federal charges. The department will decide based on the evidence. Her refusal left the attorney crestfallen. He pleaded for some leniency, but Kira offered none. She pointed out the systemic nature of the abuse, how many complaints had been dismissed or swept aside until her case forced the truth into the light. A genuine apology could have happened any time before they falsified reports and tried to ruin her life. Now it was too late to bargain for a quick escape. A week later, the departmental trial concluded. The verdict came down swiftly. Both officers were fired from the NYPD. The internal panel recommended that the district attorney file criminal charges for perjury and falsification of official documents. The city roiled in debate. Some hailed the decision as justice. Others claimed it was a witch hunt against the police. But Kira knew this was just the beginning. Real justice would require continued vigilance. In the wake of the verdict, Kira stood on the steps of City Hall, addressing a crowd of reporters. Cameras zoomed in as she spoke. This was never about personal revenge. It's about ensuring the law applies equally to everyone, regardless of race or rank. I have respect for the many good officers who serve our community, but we cannot tolerate abuse of power. We must hold bad actors accountable to protect the integrity of law enforcement and the safety of all citizens. Her words were carried by local news channels and eventually national media outlets. Discussions ignited across social platforms about policing, racism, and the need for reform. Kira's case became a rallying cry, cited in op-eds and talk shows. Lawmakers hinted at new legislation to strengthen oversight committees. Emboldened citizens filed complaints without fear, believing their voices might finally be heard. Through it all, Kira maintained her day job at the DOJ, quietly handling her caseload. She never flaunted her newfound fame. Instead, she invested her energy into community outreach, pushing for policy changes at every level of the justice system. She collaborated with civil rights groups, forging alliances that extended beyond the borders of New York. Reflecting on her journey one quiet evening, Kira thought back to that fateful morning when she was pulled over, just an ordinary citizen who happened to be black and behind the wheel. She remembered the fear, the anger, the sense of violation. But she also recalled the spark of resolve, the determination to fight for what was right. She'd been tested, and though the scars remained, she emerged stronger. Her story became part of a larger tapestry of resistance and reform, a reminder that sometimes the most profound change begins with a single injustice that cannot be ignored. In her heart, Kira held on to the hope that the resonance of her fight would inspire others, that when faced with adversity, people would remember her story and realize that the law could be a powerful weapon for good if wielded by those who refuse to be silent. And so ends the extraordinary journey of Kira Johnson, the unassuming black woman who dared to stand against injustice and emerged as a beacon of hope. Her fight was never about vanity or revenge, but about proving that no one, no matter their color, status, or station in life, should be silenced by the very system meant to protect them. As Kira continues her work within the Department of Justice, her story resonates through neighborhoods and courtrooms alike, reminding us that truth backed by determination can shatter even the strongest walls of bigotry and bias. If you found power and inspiration in Kira's story, don't let it stop here. Be sure to like this video, share it with those who need hope, and subscribe for more stories that shine a light on hidden truths. Together, we can push for real change, one voice, one story, one step at a time. Meet Kira Johnson, a poised, intelligent black woman who seemed an easy target for two racist cops at first glance. They thought she was just another helpless driver they could bully and frame. But little did they know, hidden behind Kira's calm demeanor lay a fiery resolve and a staggering secret. She was a U.S. attorney. This is the story of how Kira turned the tables on a broken system, facing off against corrupt officers and a jaded judge. Prepare for shocking revelations, courtroom showdowns, and a soul-stirring triumph that would echo across the nation. Buckle up. Justice is about to be served.